Okay, I'm seeing 4 o'clock, so I think it's probably apropos to get rolling. Today, I'm Brady Harrison. Today we'll be talking about the majority of the interactions on the internet are no longer human, consequences of the internet inversion. A little bit about me. I'm a senior data analyst at a software as a service company, Count. We do online fraud mitigation and prevention. As part of that, we do bot mitigation services and identification. So we've kind of jumped headfirst into this over the last couple of years. It's been an intrinsic part of our DNA for a while, but we've been seeing larger and larger trends across our customers and ultimately their customers that fewer and fewer digital interactions on the internet are actually people. So first, agenda-wise, bots abound, right? What's the scale of the problem? What are bots, right? How do they manifest themselves on the internet? How bots, ads, and daily active users or DAUs interact. And then what do we do about this problem? What does these kind of structural issues in advertising and other digital interactions mean for the internet as a whole? And then what do we do about it to prevent it? And then finally, some Q&A. And so we'll just cover whatever you guys find helpful. So what is a bot really? Right? Does anyone want to venture a guess? Like, when we think about a bot, what do we generally tend to think about? So that's actually a pretty great start. Any other guesses?
I was going to say similar programming.
Yeah, so that's traditionally what we've seen as bots are some kind of entity that is engaging in activity on the internet. And if we're talking about the majority of the interactions on the internet are no longer human, that was true in like 1995. And so that's not really what we're talking about per se, right? Today we're not really talking about web crawlers or APIs, the kind of the traditional traffic on the internet. The vast majority of digital data, packets, and requests are not people talking to each other. It's Google crawling, right? It's just APIs talking to each other constantly. When we talk about bots, we really want to talk about entities, programmatic, that are pretending to be people, that are pretending to be real users. So we're not web crawlers or APIs or, when we think about a Twitter bot, the person who's posting on Twitter, like what's the weather every day, or the weekend bot, which every Friday it posts the weekend, that's not kind of the issue area we're talking about. We're talking about when you go on Facebook and you see somebody say, hey, would you like to buy this from me? I'm a Nigerian prince, right? That's probably not an actual person. That's programmatic activity that is a facsimile, less and less so over time, of a person. And so that's really what we're talking about. Bots are non-human actors pretending to be human. So they're watching ads, they're really watching videos, making comments, creating accounts, engaging with sometimes each other, engaging with real users. And so that's really what they are. So, what problem scope are we having? Probably everyone in this room has gotten a friend request from a bot, right? Hey, sexy, how are you doing this weekend, right? Those are kind of romance scams, those regular ones. Oh, I have this massive trove of wealth. I just need you to wire me the money to get it out of a Swiss bank, right? So we're all pretty familiar with those, but how deep does this problem go? So some context setting, 2021, Facebook banned more than 5 billion bot accounts in 2021. Billion with a B, right? Scale-wise, they banned more bots than people on Earth in like the last 24 months, right? In the first 9 months, it was 4.5 billion, and they kind of stopped reporting. So scale-wise, we're talking about that they're banning more accounts than they have people. And for every banned account, we can probably think if anyone's been on Facebook, there's a bunch of bots that they're not catching. So they're talking about the ban number doesn't really matter, right? It's pretty easy to create accounts. Well, how many accounts are actually, we believe are fake, but we didn't stop or block? Facebook believes that about 5% of accounts are totally fake. These are not human beings who have accounts on the internet. And these are not like joke accounts, that kind of stuff. These are people or bots masquerading as people. So if you think about it, in 100 people, right, your kind of standard college classroom, 5 of those people are not people. And so the vast majority of comments, likes, views that you probably see on Facebook might not be driven by people, right? And those 5% are highly active, right? I'm not a super strong social media user. I like tweets, I share stuff sometimes, but I don't like millions of posts a day, tens of thousands of events a day. I'm only on Facebook maybe an hour a day, 2 hours a day. These bots can be posting and engaging on Facebook 24 hours a day, no breaks. Twitter is also seeing this problem. This is not localized to Facebook. You might have heard in the news, like maybe a year ago, when Twitter did a kind of a big purge of their accounts, and people were like, Twitter is silencing voices of conservatives. And then, because their accounts dropped by like 40%. Well, what they found is that across the political spectrum, about 40% of accounts on Twitter that follow people are fake. So these are bots or other kind of analogous activities that kind of pump up follower accounts. And so we're seeing this kind of pervasive everywhere. And so then we have to think, well, why aren't they doing anything about it? And we'll talk about structural issues later. Similarly, ads are really what's driving a lot of this behavior, right? This is how a lot of these sites function. In 2017, this report recently came out, but in 2017, Uber was spending $150 million a year on ads and referral programs to get people to sign up for Uber, right? In terms of market penetration, Uber probably has every person who will ever install Uber probably already has Uber on their phone. So what they found is they cut their ad budget by 2/3, and their user retention and growth didn't change. So after some digging and some probably tough conversations with these ad providers, they found that about $100 million of their annual ad spend was going to bots and fake accounts. So this is kind of just hand trading money. So we're talking about a billion with a B scale problem of bots, really localized essentially to just 5 companies, let alone kind of global issue. We saw account takeovers increase 20% as well. So bots aren't just talking to each other on Facebook and Twitter and watching Instagram ads, and liking TikToks, watching YouTube. They're, trying to take over accounts. And so how that is happening, I'll talk about it in a little. It's a slightly different issue, but we're seeing this kind of pervasive level of user activity on the internet all around, right? Google logging into your account for you is not a bot. These are someone's appears on a website and tries to pretend to be you, 1,000 times a second. Some of these are pretty easy to stop. What if it's 1 time a second sustained over 20 or 30 days, right? That would be impossible for a human to do. It's really easy for a bot, right? This was potentially crazy to me. So people were kind of digging into their ad spend, right? If you talk to people who do ad spend, a 1% click-through rate or even worse, like 1 out of 1,000 or 1,000,000 is pretty good, right? Think of the last time you clicked on a banner ad on a website. It's probably been a very long time if you're like a hardcore user of the internet, chronically online. This company found that about 50% of their third-party server impressions, so ads on outside websites, were fake. So these are just money that they're shelling out for, as we can see, tens, hundreds of millions of dollars that are just going to nobody, right? They see no connection to real human activity. And so what this means is they're like, well, why would I spend $20, $30 million running online ads when half of them, the people who actually hit the ad, are fake, and only 1% of the real people do? So now it's like 0.5%, 10, 20 basis points. You're like, if I could sell someone a 10 basis point return on investment on $1 billion, I would take that deal in a minute. You give me $1 billion, I just have to return to you $1 million in investment, right? I'll go buy pennies, right? I'll just go to the mint and buy pennies for 1.01 cents and sell them back, right? So this is not really a lucrative option for people. So we're starting to kind of see fissures that I'm going to talk about in a moment. So how do these bots really manifest, right? How do they actually engage with things online? So probably the most big and classical version that is kind of easier to conceptualize are virtual machines. So this is where you use computational power to spin up a device, whether that's a iPhone, an Android phone, a Linux phone, if you're one of those crazy people, a desktop device, right? Any device, you spin up a virtual machine, and then that can kind of engage with anything on the internet. This is a little more expensive, right? This would be essentially using like AWS or Azure or other kind of cloud-based platforms to run compute for you to generate a virtual machine. This is really common in like software and QA testing. So it's extremely cheap, and it's kind of wouldn't call it a commodity per se, but it's not very expensive to engage in. Downsides, it's more expensive than the other options, because you got to think the people that are generally engaging with this behavior are not really always on the up and up. So if they're like, if I could do something for free but illegal, that's better than cheap but legal. And so the second level that we see are kind of Internet of Things devices. And so that would be compromised IoT devices, like smart plugs, right? When well, let's not say her name, the box that lives in our house, that if you say their name, right? Those kind of smart internet connected things. The Alexa, maybe not that one per se, security tends to be high, but looking at like a random smart plug from a manufacturer in China or Taiwan, right? They don't probably spend a ton of time on security, right? They're just like, we're making a commodity smart plug. So it just we need to make it for as cheap as possible. Same with like refrigerators, right? While Samsung is a great software and hardware company, if you think like GE or some off-brand refrigerator that can connect to the internet, cybersecurity is probably not their core competency. So all of a sudden we have a device built by people who's not spending a lot of time or incentivized to spend a lot of time on cybersecurity, have a device that then can connect to the internet. If you can change the temperature in your house with a Nest or other Wi-Fi connected thermostat, that Wi-Fi can send and receive data on the internet. It doesn't just have to send or receive the temperature or turn on the fan, or when you're cozy in bed and say, turn up the heat. It can do anything. And so what we're seeing is if you're motivated, you could compromise a large number of these devices fairly easily. If you have an exploit for one smart plug, if you can find any of those smart plugs on the internet, you can tell it to do what you want. And so we kind of call those colloquially like botnets, large groups of, you can kind of imagine like a swarm of locusts on the internet. And you can say, hey, every Tuya, which is a brand of smart plug, every Tuya in the world, go to this website and comment, follow PewDiePie. Or go to this video and watch my video. And so some of those are going to get blocked, but not all of them, right? And so those are kind of compromised IoT devices. This is probably the biggest expansion area, because if you think 5 years ago, how many IoT devices did you guys have in your houses? I would provision probably 0. How many do you have now? In our house, I think we went from 0 to like double digits. And so we're not talking about like iPhones, right? Those are super secure, but we're talking about like random smart plug, Wi-Fi enabled light bulb, right? All that kind of stuff. And so this is like the explosion. If we're talking about, man, it's really expensive to spin up virtual machines and buy all this computational power. What if I could just get it? What if I could just compromise all of these? The second level of this is you can compromise actual real devices. And so these are kind of your classic cryptocurrency mining scam, where you like get malware on someone's device and then it mines Bitcoin. Crappily, but it does, right? And so, one iPhone is not going to be able to mine very much cryptocurrency, but if you have 100,000 iPhones, it can do a serviceable job, especially when you don't pay for power, you don't pay for data, right? All that kind of stuff. So these are really just compromised third-party devices. And so if we think about, in each of these, we're looking at how do I exchange computational power for the least amount of money possible? Because the bots have to do stuff, right? They have to have active internet connection, and they have to be able to send and receive requests. Sending requests, those are like requests to a website, and then receiving requests, most only what kind of the control server is telling it what to do. So these botnets of compromised devices, there's usually some kind of central device that tells it, go to this website, buy this thing, watch this ad. And so that's really how they manifest on an individual page or user experience. A compromised device is having to, or a kind of totally fictitious or virtual device, goes out to your page and does stuff. But what it does is based on kind of your own needs, right? If I'm a YouTuber and my videos are not really getting traction and my click per million is pretty low, I know I'll make like $700 or $800 per million views. I could buy $500 worth of bots, have them go watch my videos, and I'm net $300. Then maybe the bots start to, YouTube starts saying, hey, this is a pretty popular video, and we can kind of snowball. So hopefully we're kind of starting to see there's some misaligned incentives here where, hey, it's pretty easy for me to buy followers, buy accounts, buy likes, because that's part of what this kind of creator digital ad economy is generating, is how many impressions do you get, and then how much can I sell those impressions for, either via sponsored content or ads. So all this really points to, wow, we're not making people very fast, but we can make bots really, really fast. And so that gets us to this idea of the internet inversion. So this was really coined by YouTube when they were really struggling with this issue, looking at, well, we defeat so many bots and we find so many. What about the bots we don't catch or we can't identify? And so this was kind of points the direction that we're looking at. AI-generated faces have crossed the uncanny valley and are now more trustworthy than real ones. And so we're able to kind of push computational power so much that we can become not just a facsimile, not like a human indistinguishable from a real user. And so the internet inversion is this, but specifically related to user activity. So the first is, what happens when there are more bots than humans on a website or service, right? We're gonna stop a bunch of the easy ones, right? We're gonna potentially stop that IoT device that comments the same thing every time. Money doubling service, send money to my cryptocurrency wallet, right? We're probably gonna catch those pretty easy. What happens when we don't? So all of a sudden we have all of this user activity and engagement on our page that we're thinking, wow, really gaining traction with this page, getting lots of views, page load time is really short, time on page is really long. This is a great page. This content is clearly very engaging. So then the algorithms as a whole see that, hey, these kinds of users like this kinds of stuff, and they spend a lot of time on it. So let's kind of promote that. That then, all this noise in our data set, all of these fake accounts really become the signal that the algorithms are looking for. That they say, hey, this is the kind of stuff we want. This is what a person looks like. A person is active on Facebook or Twitter a lot. They're consistently commenting on kind of the same stuff or commenting kind of the same stuff a lot, like nice, exclamation point, sweet, exclamation point, exclamation point. So now the algorithm says, okay, this is good stuff. Well, what happens to the actual good stuff? Now our signal becomes noise. That the stuff that we're really trying to protect, our actual human engagement and activity, becomes the stuff we're kind of trying to block out. And so this is this idea of the inversion. So really the systems that were really designed to catch and capture bot activity are looking at bot activity and calling it human. So this was YouTube's big struggle, because they're like, this could be really, really bad for us. If we start having our algorithm label bots as human users, inevitably we have a machine learning issue, what some people might call it meta machine learning issue, where now our labels for good people are bots. And so we'll start to see this kind of shift where the algorithm starts looking at or trying to find the wrong stuff. And so this is called the internet inversion. That now algorithms are looking at the wrong stuff and our signal is totally messed up and we're kind of beyond the pale of trying to fix it. And that essentially is that inversion. I believe that inversion has not yet occurred on a technical level, on a user level has already occurred. And so there are more bots than people online today. I think easy. How we quantify, identify, and mitigate is really the hard bit. So scaling wise, right, there was a bot report looking at this kind of specific ad fraud issue. So taking down this major ad fraud ring based in Eastern Europe. So 3Eve operated on a massive scale. At its peak, it controlled over 1 million IPs from both residential and botnet infections and corporate IP spaces primarily in North America and Europe. So for context, there are less IPs than people in the United States. This is more IPs than exist in all of Ireland. So we're talking about one single ring of bad actors had control of more than 1 million IPs capable of not unlimited, but nigh unlimited activity potential. So they were able to engage in a wide variety of behavior. This one specifically was ad fraud, but imagine if you controlled 1 million IP addresses that looked real, right? We're looking at corporate or residential IP addresses like your own house. One of the ways that bot mitigation can be successful or has been successful in the past is AWS should never be logging into your website. AWS should never be purchasing from your website. There's no reason that AWS should be making a comment on your page or watching a video, right? That's Amazon Web Services, cloud computing platform that lets you kind of borrow computing power from Amazon for a fee. You think, why would someone be using AWS to watch my service, right? That shouldn't happen. Why is Azure, Microsoft's version, commenting on my YouTube channel? Like, that doesn't make sense. So historically, IPs have been one way to kind of stop this behavior. That we say, hey, this is a non-residential IP. This is associated with a hosting facility. There's no reason that a human actor would connect from these. So that's why botnets have gone down these compromised device path, because they say it's connecting from Brady's house. It's connecting from your house. That looks pretty normal, right? You're not seeing a bunch of IP connections from Bangladesh, even though that's where the host server might be. You're seeing, online interactions from everywhere in the globe. So you're not seeing 99% of your traffic is all of a sudden AWS. You might see a slight blip in traffic, but it's evenly distributed across hundreds or thousands of IP addresses. So bots, ads, and daily active users, right? We're starting to see kind of the mill start turning in terms of fissures of confidence in kind of this ad structure. So based on what we've talked about, we say, hey, ads don't seem like a very good deal for anybody but the person who's selling ads or has a platform for ads. Everybody else, namely the person who wants to buy ads, is getting the short end of the stick. So you can see here, Procter & Gamble contends too much digital ad spend is a waste. And so that says, okay, well, now we got to back up a little, because looking at that Uber fraud problem, how do most websites survive on the internet? There's really two models of revenue on the internet for online content. You can either be ad supported, most social media, 99% of social media, like, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, right? All of that's supported, Instagram, even most, commercial media websites, YouTube, Twitch, right? Most of those are primarily supported, or might have a blend of ad supported and subscription, but primarily ad supported, right? That's how TikTok stays up, right? That's how Facebook stays solvent. Facebook made 98% of its revenue on ads in 2021. So it's like their business. Their only business is really selling ads. And so there's other options, less popular, can't grow it quite the same way, right? Subscription, that would be like Peloton, Netflix, right? Most streaming, right? A lot of enterprise SaaS services are mostly subscription based. So we're talking about 90% of the internet versus like 9% of the internet is ads, right? If you can go to a website and you don't have to pay, it's probably ad supported. Otherwise, you're like, well, how do they keep the lights on? So part of this is this fissure in confidence. So P&G last year, Procter & Gamble, they make stuff like Dove soap and Gillette, right? Tons and tons of consumer white goods, massive corporation. They cut about $100 million in their digital ad spend because they saw bots and some other activity that they weren't really pleased with. So it seems like about 50 to 60% of the problem was bots, right? That they're seeing ad impressions on pages that are either fake, like I generate a website that has no content, all it does is serve ads. And so if I have a website that's 99% ads and no content, all I need to do is just get bots to go to that page and watch and click those ads. The other part of it is there's not a lot of control of where those ads go. The marketplace is pretty murky, that you have providers and platforms and resellers. So if I'm a company and I want to buy ads just on the general internet, I don't really have a ton of control of where those ads specifically go. So I think it's probably 80-20. They saw that their click-through rates on these were pretty terrible, and then some of their ads were displaying on kind of objectionable content, stuff that they didn't fit with their brand identity, which probably pretty clear what that kind of stuff would be. But most of they're just like, this is worthless. We're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on ads that are getting watched by bot farms or are getting watched on fake websites, right? Fake YouTube views, fake Instagram followers. Most of our ad spend is going to nothing. We would be better off to light it on fire, as Uber essentially found out that, hey, we're spending $150 million. We cut it by $100 million, and our user retention and growth didn't change. So essentially, they took the GDP of like a large corporation or even country and just lit it on fire and then they saw no change in their business in terms of user retention. And so we're starting to see people are like, why would I do this? What am I getting out of it, right? The traditional narrative has been, oh, it's really hard to connect an online ad to a purchase, so we automatically have some kind of murky behavior, as well as click-through and conversion is terrible, right? Like a 1%. If I had a 1% success rate at my job, right, I probably wouldn't have my job for very long. But if you're selling ads, 1% is great. And so we're starting to see, well, what am I getting out of this? This is not really valuable. Even if I don't have like brand or market saturation of like, hey, my ads, like everyone's like, why does Coke still do ads? Like who hasn't heard of Coke, right? Part of it is like brand awareness and activity, sure, but most of that spend is not even going to people, right? It's just kind of evaporating into thin air. Likely it's evaporating into criminal organizations like based all around the globe who are using that to engage in all kinds of nefarious activity because you're like, wow, I could make $100 million stealing ads from YouTube, or I could try to run guns across the border or sell drugs or human trafficking victims. That sounds way easier and safer, right? You can't really run guns in pajamas, but it's really easy to spin up a bot farm, from your bedroom. And so now we're starting to see some structural issues about this. That companies are like, P&G is calling for the ad industry as a whole to kind of clean itself up, right? You guys need to have more transparency about where ads are being served and kind of clean up this bot fraud issue. Because not only are we don't know where our ads are getting displayed, we don't know who they're getting displayed to, and we believe most of them are fake. So it's a bit of structural issues here. So how do we change? And so now we're getting into kind of the future of the internet talk. So most of your and my favorite websites are free. I don't pay anything to use them. So as kind of a medium of exchange, you either sell my data, like Facebook, and use that to better target ads so I get better ad buys, or you show me ads, right? Those are really the two ways in which websites remain free. So when we talk about a free and open internet, that ads are really what's supporting a free and open internet for most websites. So you think most social media, most newspapers, any digital content is mostly ad supported. And so now where do we go from here? Let's say we want to move away from ads. Do we go to small payments? Is it cryptocurrency, right? So we have some structural issues about small payments of like, well, what would you pay to read a news story or listen to a song? Is it a penny? Half a penny? Okay, how do you pay someone half a penny, right? Visa and MasterCard are like, yeah, sure, we'll take your 1 cent payment, but we're going to charge the merchant 25 cents plus 40% of the payment. And so they're like, what? The customer who's serving ads is like, I don't want to do that. Is it cryptocurrency, right? I mine cryptocurrency using computational power on my machine, and then if I view your site, I send you like 0.0001 cryptocurrency, right? And then we have like, what about exchange fees? Like who keeps that system up, right? So now we kind of have structural issues of we're kind of locked into ads until we figure out a way to pay for content that's free. Or we all have to start paying for content, which none of us are gonna do, right? If I can get something for free, YouTube is like the greatest source of entertainment on the planet, right? Literally trillions of hours of content that I can watch for free from people all around the world in every language. How much would I pay for that? It's like, well, I wouldn't pay 50, 5, 10, right? So now we're getting into a bigger problem. And then if the user population is small, why do I want to create ads for 10 cents? The second part is providers, people who are selling a platform for ads are really locked into unrealistic KPIs. So we talked about bots, ads, now daily active users. And so Facebook banned 5 billion accounts in 2021. And so they're probably not the only one, right? Every platform has tons of fake accounts, but we know about 5% of those are fake. And so if we assume 5% or more, we know that 5% of their daily active users are probably fake. What happens if we see their daily active users plummet by 10%? Their stock price is based on revenue and daily active users. And if I'm a merchant who's like, hey, I have a great product, I want to sell to people, why would I pick the platform that has a declining number or a stable number of daily active users, right? I want to find a platform that's growing, that I can have more people reach my message. So platforms are really incentivized to pump up the numbers as much as possible because like, look, we have a billion daily active users. We have a billion people who log into our website every day and want to see ads. So when you want to micro target, guys like me, like from Idaho, work in tech, right, makes about this much, likes to mountain bike, you can target that person. But if you only have 100 million active users or a million active users, you probably don't get that granularity of targeting. And so platforms are really quite incentivized to ban the minimum number of accounts to maintain kind of network quality, right? So the user experience isn't garbo, but not so many that user retention starts to dive, right? How many Americans are probably signing up for Facebook every day? Very few, I would imagine, right? Most of their growth is overseas. Minus all the people who deactivate their Facebook or delete their Facebook every day, we start to see a kind of negative dive of ad sales or daily active users. And so platforms are kind of in this catch-22, is like, I have to ban enough bots that my platform isn't horrible user experience, but I can't ban so many that my daily active users tanks, and then nobody wants to sell on my platform. So now we have really a misaligned incentive between platforms want to pump up the numbers, buyers of ad space globally on the internet, they really want to set up and say, hey, we really want to get high click engagement on this campaign, that I say, hey, I will buy and provision your ads, and then I will make sure that you get 1 million active hits every day, and you're going to pay me 0.00001 pennies per view. And the seller, like P&G or Uber, goes, great, deal. You can give me 100 million views, I'll give you, $100,000. And so now the person left holding the bag at this point is really the person who has a product to sell, because the platform's not incentivized to cut these bots out or engage in extremely harsh mitigation. These sellers of ads don't want to kind of talk about the elephant in the room, that most of the people looking at ads are fake, and then even of the people who do, the conversion is horrible. So now the only person is, as we're starting to see, the only person who's actually holding money here is like, wait, this sucks. I'm not getting really anything out of this, and the platforms are kind of struggling to, what do we do here? So those are kind of the stage. So what do we do about this? Like really what's next, right? How do we look ahead and better identify these bots, right? We want to help platforms because they provide us great content and ways of engaging with the world, right? It would be pretty hard for startup news outlets to provide that news without some form of advertising, right? It lets us see and find new products, right? So we're kind of locked into the system, so we really need to figure out at least how to stem this issue or hopefully improve on it as a whole. So what do we do, right? Advanced tools and technologies. So these are kind of the 4 main ways that people are attacking or mitigating bots online. So the first is proof of work. If you have any crypto heads in here, this should be pretty straightforward, that we're gonna ask you to do something that's computationally difficult, right? Can we get a toaster who's connected to the internet, solve this trigonometry problem? A toaster doesn't probably have the processing power to do it, or if it does, it takes a really long time. And so part of this is a scale issue. So we say, we're not gonna stop every bot because a light switch probably can't do a trig problem, right? It can't, you can do these visually as well. So like a light bulb doesn't have the computational power to like render an image and then move those images around in space in like Java. But some might, but if we make it so computationally complex that rather than 100 million activities an hour from a specific botnet, if we can get that to 1 million, now we've considerably shrank the problem. So there's some limits to this, right? It does kind of limit users who might have odd connections or ways of interfacing with your website, but really this is kind of a proof of work concept. Can we get a toaster to do trig? Because if it can't, we know it's probably not a real device, right? Any device in our pockets or this laptop could do a trig problem, no problem. It'd take it like 1/100 of a second. But a light switch was designed to go on, off, right? It's not really designed to have the computational power to do that. And the interesting part here is you can scale based on the activity, right? Pretty easy. Or low kind of risk activity, we're really just looking to stop the bottom of the barrel stuff. But if we have like an account takeover event on someone's bank account, we could way scale up the level of difficulty. The next is some kind of network analysis, so we can measure and monitor IP interaction, so collating events across time, right? Is the same IP associated with many devices connecting, or can we look to find information about, anomalous behavior from IP addresses? And so are IPs interacting in a way that's strange? Are we seeing similar requests from different IPs that we don't believe are real? And so this is kind of this like network analysis on page load to see, hey, do we really think this is a person, or why is the same person loading our web page 1,000 times an hour? This is probably not a person, right? This is probably not someone looking to engage with our content. This is a bot. Next is like biometrics. So this is the really fancy stuff. So looking to see, right, if you're typing on your phone, we're generally going to see that the phone moves a little bit. And you don't just like light speed type in everything that you're typing. A mouse, right, even though if you are straight as possible, you're not going to move it in a perfectly straight line across pixels. But a bot, when they move about your page, it potentially can move in like perfectly straight lines or at perfectly straight angles, right? Or they interact with your web page in a superhuman manner. So these are kind of advanced stats on human behavior. So if we're looking at like a phone, we can see, is that phone moving in space? Like if you hold perfectly still at a vertical angle, right, your phone knows that it's like that. And so if it's a virtual machine, it's going to just know that, hey, this phone is perfectly straight. The altitude is 0, like barometric pressure is 0, right? All of this stuff that tells, this is not what a device actually looks like, right? If you're typing on your phone, it's moving around, you're in a car, right? The device is moving, right? And so that's this kind of biometric behavior that we can see. Is this a person who's typing, is it kind of their normal typing speed, or is this a bot instantly entering, right? Is the bot moving rapidly across the page in a perfect arc, or is it kind of like squiggling like a normal human would? And the last is like proxy piercing. So this relies on this kind of relationship of, if I have a service that I'm calling that connects through a residential IP address, I might be able to pierce that and see where that original connection is from. So while it might look like tens of thousands of different users all connecting to my page, if I could pierce that proxy, I could say, oh, it's actually one IP in the Netherlands that's connecting to my page. Or it's one Azure or AWS server that's connecting to my page, rather than tens of thousands of residential IPs. And so proxy piercing is one way to kind of get through this level of obfuscation that's being used to look at, hey, I'm just a regular user at a house in the Midwest. We can pierce that proxy like, actually, you're an AWS server located in Nigeria, or just a regular command and control server in France. This is not what we would generally expect for user behavior. Let's do a step-up authentication on that experience, either deny or step up. So the future, like now what are we moving towards, right? We're kind of locked into ads. What happens if we don't solve this bot problem overall? So really what we need is Moore and Wright laws. So Moore's law, computational power will double in a set amount of time. And then Wright's law, every cumulative doubling of production reduces costs at a set rate. So really processing and storage costs are falling rapidly, right? So it's easier and easier for me to service a more complex website all the time. So I can kind of put more computational power at play for cheaper and cheaper and cheaper over time. On both sides, either as a platform provider or as a bot, kind of net. Second, right, kind of this cost structure is not only does power go up, that means that costs go down. So it's cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. So maybe in the past I would pay $100 or $1,000 per million interactions. Now it's 10 or 5. And so now we see like we now have a kind of what I colloquially like to think of as a faster than the bear problem. Is historically, if you were faster than the cheapest, easiest, worst botnet possible, you could deal with most of the problems. And now all of a sudden that solution that worked 5 years ago is not good enough, right? The bear has kind of the same speed. Colloquially, the bear is kind of like bad stuff happening, and your friend keeps getting faster. And so we have to keep ahead of them, because this is not a kind of raw network of activity. It's kind of an adversarial relationship, right? We are people selling ads or providing a service, and then people who are looking to take advantage of that in a profit-driven manner. There's some non-profit-driven activity. You think of like DDoS or other attacks on websites, or journalists, right? That kind of stuff. Those are really not profit motivated, so we can't think of it that way. But ad fraud is generally profit motivated. So if I think, well, if I can spend $10 on bots and $50, spinning up a web page, and then I can get to sell ads, I could be making, in one of these instances that Eve, they were making like $5 million a day on stolen ads. And so that's a pretty sweet gig. I set up websites, all day and just run ads through there to make $5 million a day. Of relatively clean money, right? I sold it through a real platform. It rolls through my real business. The only part I have to obfuscate that the users are fake. So downsides, right? For me, computational costs going down. As a provider though, running a website is more expensive than ever. I need to have DDoS, bot mitigation, fraud prevention, right? All this content moderation activity, and I'm servicing higher and higher quality traffic, right? Remember when we first got on the internet and it was like a picture was like a big deal and you would like load the picture slowly. And then it was video and it was like a cell phone camera, like 180p, 140p. Now it's pretty common to watch YouTube in 4K, right? Netflix has a 4K option. So users are expecting more and more higher resolution activity. So a lot of the gains that platforms are getting and computational costs are going down are just getting eaten up by more and more expensive content and hosting a more and more expensive website. So what really happens when the music stops? Let's say ads, everyone's like, I'm never gonna buy ads again. What happens? So companies really start seeing limited results in ads. That's kind of where we are now. And then they stop buying ads. So what happens to Reddit when they can't sell ads anymore? They're probably not just going to run it out of the charity of their hearts, right? And so they are close, right? Facebook, we're a long ways from this, but that's really kind of the issue that we're facing is when the music stops, a lot of the internet then gets called into jeopardy. Some of our favorite and best parts of interacting online rely on services that are free or ad supported, right? Wikipedia, not really ad supported, but free. YouTube, Twitter, Facebook are all generally ad supported. If you are not paying for content, you are the content that is being marketed towards. And so if no one wants to market towards you, that channel of information essentially goes away. So then we get into a credit crunch, right? So now companies are like, hey, if 50% of users are fake and there's no more ads that I can sell, no one wants to buy the ad space that I'm selling, where my revenue dries up, right? Imagine if Facebook had a 50% dive in revenue in 6 months, right? That would be catastrophic for their business, and catastrophic for nearly any business. So then we get to that point that venture capital and private equity firms are like, well, we thought this cool new social media, like free website play was really gonna be supported, and we start yanking funds from unprofitable ventures. And so we think of like, Twitter doesn't make money, right? A lot of social media brands and websites when they first start don't make money, and so they rely on private equity and venture capital to kind of get going. And if those funds dry up because at the top of the funnel no one wants to sell ads, it has kind of cascading effects on the internet. And so the kind of, in summary, right, bots are the internet. I think, period, that's what most of the stuff on the internet is fake, right? Go to any comment by the president, whomever it is, and look at most of the stuff under it is all junk, right? It's bots from all corners of the globe trying to either push a specific narrative or sell you a specific product. Like every time Elon Musk tweets, like 90% of the comments under it are, hey, send money to my Bitcoin wallet. Hey, do this. And so most of that stuff is, we're already there. Kind of we have a bot trolley problem, right? Platforms are kind of stuck without good options. If we nuke our users, all of the kind of stuff that we talked about in 2021, hey, we're growing, more user growth and retention than ever, kind of goes out the window. And you think, oh, maybe this is just BS and half of your users are fake. Maybe it's not 5%, maybe it's 15 or 50. And so platforms are really stuck. They're like, well, we can't pivot, right? Companies that move to a subscription-based model tend to shrink, and revenues do too. Some are successful, like free content on the internet, like Patreon is really driving a lot of this activity, but they're kind of stuck. Like, what do? You start taking cryptocurrency, like we talked about earlier. There's kind of you're between a rock and a hard place. There's kind of a tech arms race, right? Solution providers like Cloudflare and others who are attempting to mitigate this activity are have a pretty high compliance regime and are waiting on kind of enterprise activity, and they don't really allow corporate collusion, right? Cloudflare is not talking to its competitors about how to best mitigate bots, right? Because that's kind of their secret sauce in between them. But bot farms are definitely talking to each other. And so solution providers can potentially compete with criminal R&D, but it takes a lot of time, money, and investment, which is happening, but not at the scale of this activity. And then lastly, really a day of reckoning is coming, right? If the ad industry and doesn't kind of figure its stuff out, if we see more and more people like P&G pull ad funds, that can draw serious issues for the internet as a whole, but specifically for free content online. Think of your favorite, Twitch streamer, YouTuber, right? Facebook, Instagram personality. All of these people who create content that we love are going to be stuck in a lurch if there's no more ad dollars to sell to you. And so that's happening. And so we're starting to see fissures of confidence in an already uneasy alliance, right? They're already not super pleased because they were convinced that a 1% click-through rate was a success. And now that they're saying it's more like 0.5% because half is fake. So that's it for me today. I want to say thank you. This is a super interesting topic for me personally and professionally. I think bots are kind of probably one of our biggest problems on the internet, and they're kind of a focal point for a lot of other issues, right? So cryptocurrency, ads, like a free and fair internet, right? Equity and equal access to the internet. And so it's kind of the nexus of a lot of cool and interesting stuff. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn or talk more about this stuff, you can add me there or send me an email at bwh@count.com. And so with that, we'll open the floor for some Q&A.
If anyone has a mic check, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Where we be? Maybe.
Do we have? There we go. That's the nub.
If anyone has any questions, feel free to raise your hand. I'll come around with the mic.
How's it going?
Good.
Great presentation. I appreciate your passion in this subject. I have a background in digital advertising, and you can't work in the industry without getting involved in bots.
Yeah.
So I guess my question for you is, have you given? I mean, obviously you've given a lot of thought to this, but have you architected a solution? Like, do you have a good idea of how you would solve this problem specifically?
So
and at a high level, what would that look like?
Yeah, so I'm not a technologist per se, right? I'm not a web developer. But from research, I think there's a lot of cool stuff in proof of work. That is an interesting avenue that some people like Qt are doing. That's kind of one of their tout, that they ask these bots to do things that they might not be able to do. So that's kind of one issue, is like, can we get bots off of legitimate websites, right? That's an issue.
So would that additional cost the additional cost to handle that, additional processing power to prove you're a human, does that pass on to the media buyer?
So that would pass on to the user. And so what that does is the proof of work actually comes from the device accessing the page. So when the device hits the page, we ask it to do a math problem or to solve some kind of spatial reasoning problem. And then that takes up the computational resource of the person accessing the site. For you and me, we wouldn't notice a difference of the laptop doing a trig problem. But a light switch, right, that's a huge lift for it. So it can do it, but rather than processing 100 requests a second, it might be only able to process 5. And if we can only process 5, now we shrink the bots from 50% of the problem to 5. That works for a while, but now we kind of have a sliding scale of we have to keep increasing difficulty. You kind of see this in like the Bitcoin problem, that as there's more and more computational power, it keeps getting more and more difficult. So that's how we would probably do both one side of it, right? That's the watching fake ads. The other part is how ads are served. So I don't know if that's a technology solution, but when we look at some of these websites that are solely driven to create ads, not talking about you go on the newspaper and they have a really salacious promoted headline, and it's just an ad that has content, but it's really just to facilitate hundreds of ads on the side, talking about totally fake websites. That problem would be separate. So that's maybe a buyer-seller issue of, hey, maybe we need to do a little more left on who can sell ads? What space do we allow ads to be sold?
Yeah, the IAB responsible for governing, digital advertising, the Internet Advertising Bureau, they have technical protocols for ad delivery, but those protocols are also vulnerable, and they don't do a very good job of governing it. And it's almost like a racket where you pay for a membership with the IAB, so you can be a bad actor and you can, work with botnets and spam your network's publisher sites and monetize it legally very easily.
Yeah, there's no disincentive, right? There might be fraud, there may be, but again, we have a jurisdictional issue. Like, I'm a solution provider in a platform in the US, the company's in France, the website is hosted in the Netherlands or Sealand, and the person who owns it is a Filipino national. Even if we do convict them of a crime of fraud whose court is that? Is it a French court? Is it a Danish court? Yeah. You would have to pick, right? So we have a jurisdictional issue, and then who prosecutes that crime? Is it the FBI? The FBI is like, you have a $5 million ad case? We're trying to stop terrorists here. And so low priority crime, because the harm, unfortunately, is just to the person selling ads. So there's a lot of issues here. I'm kind of talking about an uneasy piece between providers. But I think proof of work is probably the easiest upside. One, to implement, it's relatively straightforward on a page to be like, hey, before you can land on our page, what's 2 + 2? There's a relatively simple example, but some of these devices have no computational power and couldn't answer basic arithmetic questions. And then it kind of scales up from there, right? If a virtual machine kind of has unlimited, so that wouldn't really stop that, but IoT or other devices, that could essentially get you. The other one that we're kind of seeing is visual proof of work. So rather than having it do a math problem, you render an image or something, it has to tell you something about that image. Not just like a captcha, like click and show this stuff, but tell me something about this image. And so that forces the device to, number one, have to be able to render an image, and number two, be able to have to look at it. And so if you have a regular laptop or a phone, it renders images all the time. It's pretty easy. But if it doesn't, it's just like a full stop. You're like, hey, if you can't render an image, why are you on my webpage at all?
Excellent presentation, thank you. The discussion so far really is about technological advances, right? You've got Google Lens, for example, that can look at an image and identify what it is. So we've got apps now that you can take a picture of a tree and it'll say, this looks like this tree. It's a magnolia. And I think even with the proof of work, I agree that processing power will increase, but you also have another threat, which I was wondering if you thought about, is with facial recognition, deep, the fake AI, what they call it, the deep fake.
Yes.
And the Web 3.0 coming out. I guess my question to you is, do you see the end of anonymity within the internet? Meaning that you can no longer use the internet without providing proof that you are who you say you are, and there being a database for like a global IAM type of a platform that helps differentiate that.
Yeah, so interesting question, right? China is doing this already to kind of mitigate, I don't know if they're doing it for bot reasons, but to create an account on Weibo or like other Chinese social media, you have to have a national ID. So that really ups the level of complexity for creating fake accounts, because now all of a sudden you're in a synthetic identity space when you just wanted to find fake Weibo followers, right? That's a way higher level of complexity of work that you would have to engage in. So that's one approach. That would never fly in the United States, right? We struggle with a national ID, let alone like a national ID that then is used to track you across the internet. So it's probably never gonna happen. Some of it is kind of like, what does authentication look like on the second stage of the internet, right? How do we make that easy and fast and secure? Facial recognition is one way, right? We're already seeing some issues in facial recognition coming up, like a deep fake can fake what your face looks like. We're also seeing in really sophisticated users that they'll use prosthetics, right? This would be a really expansive use case, right? Using prosthetics to fake someone and trick a device into opening, right, for authenticated ID. Part of it is you could increase the cost of engaging on the internet, right? This is what VoIP, voice over IP phones are thinking about, right? It's really, 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 really cheap right now to create VoIP phone calls. Hence, there's tons of spam VoIP phone calls, right? So one method that they're thinking about of better authenticating on the internet is rather than having, you can send phone calls for free just based on your provider, what if you had to pay a penny a piece for interchange for every spam call, right? That kind of destroys the profit economics of spam calls, right? Because if you make 1,000 calls and one person answers, and only 10% of the people who answer you actually scam, now we spent tens of thousands of dollars on calls that didn't go anywhere. So that's kind of the small profit section of how you could authenticate on the internet is increasing costs. But what does that do to users who don't have, right? Like big parts of, we're starting to see internet as a global human right of, well, what if you're in a very impoverished place and you don't have funds, right? How do you make it free and fair for those people to access the internet if you significantly increase the cost? Some of it could be biometrics, right? But the process for that stuff is ugly, and a global recognition system is, I think, would be kind of scary, right? In terms of like who is running and securing and maintaining a global authentication system, right? Apple does a wonderful job, but still has problems, right? This is kind of the hacking issue, right? So not to get off on a tangent, but let's say we have a national system of truly authenticating a human being based on some uniquely identifiable behavior that's difficult to fake, like iris scans and DNA, right? You like spit in a tube and you send it to this global agency and they give you like a MFA token. Well, now all of a sudden we have a global agency who stores the keys for interacting on the internet as any human being. So someone, if we move to this system, like, why do I need to log in anymore? It's me, right? Then I would be able to be Brady on the internet. And I think as many have seen, it's not really a if, but a when if any internet resource is compromised. I don't think any corporation or government on the planet can sustain defense against a well-motivated, highly funded attacker, right? If you see like non-state actors, they do okay in terms of like stealing credit cards and like you see Anonymous like breaking into the Russian government. But I think it's realistic to say that the Chinese government or the US government can hack into seemingly whatever they want, giving enough time and resources. So now we have a very, very, very expensive and very, very lucrative option for stealing from people that is kind of a if not a if, but a when that someone breaks into that archive. So that's a long way of saying, I'm not sure. We're kind of in really messy waters of like, we want some anonymity on the internet, but not too much. And if we have none, then we can't really believe that anyone is, disinformation, who's real, who's not, right? How many Instagram followers do they really have? Versus we need some anonymity on the internet. Like Twitter has a reason that they don't do high level, verifications because they want people in, repressed or otherwise complex situations to be able to access and post on the internet. So we're kind of in a damned if you do, damned if you don't territory. So not sure, right? We maybe go cost, right? But I don't know if a centralized authority is, number one, going to work, right? Getting the U.S. government to say that Americans can join like this global identity IP verification service is already complex, right? We can't agree on a national ID, let alone a national reservoir of personally identifiable information. So not sure. That's a bigger brain problem than I have.
Any other questions? All right. I think in that case we can call it good. Brady, thank you very much for your time. Excellent presentation again. And that concludes our content for the day. Get out there, enjoy some great music, and hope to see you all back tomorrow.